You know that person who always knew they were going to leave? The one who grew up looking at the edges of their hometown like they were the edges of something smaller than what they were meant for. Who loved the people, but felt the walls. Who stayed as long as staying made sense, and then one day packed everything they had into a car or a suitcase or a one-way ticket and drove towards something they couldn't fully name yet. Not running away, not ungrateful, not too good for where they came from. Just following something so deep in their psychology that staying would have meant slowly disappearing. If you've ever left a place that made you, and spent years trying to reconcile the guilt of that leaving with the necessity of it, today, on Mentra Psychology, we're breaking down exactly what the psychology says about people who leave their hometown, and why leaving was never the betrayal it was made out to be. Let's dismantle the story that followed you out of that town. The one that says leaving means you think you're better, that ambition is ingratitude wearing a nicer coat, that the people who stayed are loyal and the people who left are selfish, as if geography were a measure of character and staying put were a virtue in itself. That story was never about truth. It was about comfort, about the discomfort that the person who leaves creates simply by leaving. Because when you go, you make a statement that nobody in that room asked for, that there was somewhere else worth going. And not everyone is ready to hear that. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Leaving your hometown isn't a rejection of where you came from. It's an answer to something calling from within. And the psychology of the people who follow that call, who choose growth over comfort, possibility over familiarity, isn't disloyalty. It's courage wearing the disguise of a one-way ticket. Maybe you've spent years defending a decision that should never have required a defense. Maybe you felt the guilt of holidays, phone calls, and conversations with people who stayed, and wondered whether leaving made you someone who abandoned the place that built you. It didn't. Leaving your hometown doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you someone who took the life they were given and decided it was a starting point, not a destination. Today on Mentra Psychology, we're breaking down the psychology of people who leave their hometown. Not the romanticized version that turns every departure into a hero's journey. The real psychology. The behavioral science behind what leaving actually does to a person, to their identity, their relationships, their sense of self, and why the people who do it are almost never the ones the hometown narrative makes them out to be. Because here's what the mainstream conversation about leaving always gets wrong. It frames leaving as an ending, a severance, a clean break from a place and the people in it. But the psychology of leaving your hometown isn't about endings. It's about the complicated, beautifully messy process of becoming someone that the place you came from gave you the foundation to be, even if it couldn't give you the space to finish becoming it. Society calls it leaving. Psychology calls it expansion. And there is a profound difference between those two things that the people who stayed will never fully understand, and the people who left will spend years trying to articulate. Here's where the psychology of leaving your hometown gets fascinating. Psychologists have identified a concept called self-expansion theory. The idea that human beings are fundamentally driven to grow beyond their current sense of self by acquiring new perspectives, experiences, and environments that expand who they are and what they're capable of becoming. And here's the psychological fact that should reframe everything. Research from the University of Illinois found that people who relocated away from their hometown demonstrated significantly higher levels of personal growth, self-concept clarity, and psychological autonomy than those who remained in their place of origin, regardless of income, education, or relationship status. In other words, the act of leaving itself produced the growth, not the destination, not the opportunity, the leaving. Because leaving your hometown forces something that staying never requires: the complete reconstruction of identity without the safety net of familiar context. And here's the fact that should stop you completely. A landmark study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who lived in multiple places across their lifetime scored significantly higher on measures of creativity, cognitive flexibility, and cross-cultural empathy than those who spent their lives in a single geographic location.
The person who left their hometown wasn't just physically relocating. They were expanding the psychological range of everything they were capable of thinking, feeling, and becoming. The psychology of leaving isn't about escaping where you came from. It's about becoming someone large enough to honor it. But self-expansion theory only explains part of the story. Because beneath the research, there's something more complicated. Something every person who has ever left a hometown carries quietly in both directions. Psychologists call it cultural bereavement. The grief of leaving behind not just a place, but an entire identity constructed within it. The inside jokes nobody in the new city understands. The version of you that only exists in the presence of people who knew you before you became who you are now. Leaving didn't just take you somewhere new. It cost you something irreplaceable in the process. And here's the psychological truth nobody tells the person who leaves. Psychologists call it post-relocation growth. Personal development that only occurs when a person rebuilds their identity in an unfamiliar environment without the scaffolding of familiar people and places. Research from Cornell University found that people who relocated away from their hometown reported dramatically higher levels of self-confidence, adaptability, and personal agency than those who stayed, not immediately, but 5 to 10 years later. The growth wasn't instant, it was compounded. Maya Angelou, Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Coco Chanel. People who took the foundation their hometown gave them and built something on top of it that the hometown never could have contained. You didn't leave because you were ungrateful. You left because you were becoming something the place that made you was never going to be big enough to hold. Now, honesty matters here. Leaving doesn't automatically produce growth. Some people leave and recreate the same patterns in a different zip code. So ask yourself honestly, did you leave to become someone or to escape someone you didn't want to deal with? Because one is expansion, the other is relocation without transformation. On Mentra Psychology, we call leaving the inevitable journey of every person who was always too large for the life they were born into. You didn't leave because you stopped loving it. You left because something in your psychology loved your potential more than it loved your comfort. Did you leave your hometown? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe. The next video goes even deeper. Click it. You'll understand why.